The case designated by law enforcement as the Zip Gun Bomber represents a series of mail-delivered explosive devices that terrorized the New York metropolitan area between 1982 and 1996. The perpetrator's identity remains unknown despite extensive investigation by multiple federal and local agencies. 6 confirmed incidents resulted in 1 death and multiple injuries, with the devices sharing distinctive construction characteristics that linked them to a single maker. On May 7, 1982, at approximately 4:10 p.m., Joan Betty Kipp opened a package at her residence located at 132 91st Street in the Bay Ridge section of Brooklyn, New York. An explosive device detonated, firing 3 .22 caliber bullets in different directions. 2 projectiles struck Kipp in the abdomen, while a third embedded in a nearby wall. Joan Kipp, aged 54, had been employed as a high school guidance counselor for over 15 years, supervising counseling programs for School District 20, which encompassed the neighborhoods of Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst, and Borough Park. She also served as treasurer of the Bay Ridge Community Council and was expected to be elected to the organization's vice president position. Kipp had departed her workplace early that Friday afternoon to prepare for a Mother's Day weekend trip to the family's summer home at Lake Hayward, Connecticut. Howard Kipp, Joan's husband, was returning home when the explosion occurred. Upon entering the house, he found his wife conscious but bleeding. Emergency medical personnel transported Joan Kipp to Lutheran Hospital, where she died during surgery at approximately 7:45 p.m., 3.5 hours after the explosion. The explosive device had been constructed using a 6-volt battery connected through electrical wiring to metal tubes filled with explosive powder and 3 .22 caliber rifle shells. The tubes were positioned to target vital organs at chest height. Investigators determined that the package had been mailed from Staten Island and delivered at approximately noon on May 7, 1982. Neither Joan nor Howard Kipp was present at the time of delivery. Accompanying the device was a threatening note that read, "Dear Joan, you're dead." The note contained additional threats against other family members. The investigation into Joan Kipp's death was conducted by the New York Police Department with assistance from federal agencies due to the use of the postal system. Howard Kipp cooperated fully with investigators, providing Joan's personal diary and keys to his marine engineering business for examination. He stated that investigators conducted searches of their home for days, examining all aspects of their lives and activities. While police never officially confirmed Howard Kipp as a person of interest, investigative reports suggest he was initially considered a suspect. Craig Kipp, age 28, became the primary suspect in his mother's death. He resided in the Brierley Hall Apartments on Marine Avenue, approximately 2 blocks from his parents' home. Craig had been dismissed from his father's marine consulting business, where he had gained knowledge of electrical wiring through installations on ships and boats. Investigators theorized that this dismissal created resentment toward his parents. Evidence against Craig Kipp included scent detection by a German Shepherd trained to identify odors on packages, which indicated his presence on the bomb packaging. Handwriting analysis initially suggested similarities between Craig's writing and the threatening note found with the device. Additionally, Craig refused to submit to police interviews or polygraph examinations. On August 9, 1982, after returning from the family's summer vacation home in Connecticut, Craig Kipp was arrested by federal authorities. He was charged with mailing injurious articles, a federal offense that carried the possibility of a life sentence when the mailing resulted in death. Bail was set at $300,000, which was posted by his father. Prosecutors described Craig's relationship with his mother as characterized by hatred and bitterness. However, family members disputed these characterizations, maintaining that while Craig and Joan had occasional disagreements typical of parent-child relationships, they loved each other. Howard Kipp stated that Craig's departure from the marine consulting business was amicable, based on mutual recognition that Craig was not suited for the technical work required and his reluctance to travel for extended periods. Both Howard and Doreen Kipp refuted allegations of Craig's serious drug use, acknowledging only that he smoked marijuana occasionally, but had no significant substance abuse problems. In June 1983, charges against Craig Kipp were dropped by the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. Charles Abercrombie, who handled the prosecution, stated that subsequent handwriting analysis performed by other experts failed to find similarities between Craig's writing and the threatening note. Abercrombie noted that linking block lettering to specific individuals was extremely difficult. The only other significant evidence, the German Shepherd's scent detection, was deemed insufficiently reliable without additional corroborating evidence. Following the dismissal of charges, the case grew cold. Joan Kipp's death remained an isolated incident in law enforcement records for over 11 years. On October 15, 1993, Anthony Lenza, a 68-year-old retired sanitation worker from Staten Island, was vacationing with his wife Connie in Pike County, Pennsylvania. Their children and grandchildren visited, bringing mail that had accumulated during their absence. Anthony opened a package addressed to him containing a blue velvet coin box. When he opened the container, described as being opened upside down, an explosive device detonated. The explosion injured Anthony and Connie Lenza, as well as their 11-year-old granddaughter Liza. All injuries were treatable, and no fatalities occurred. The device was constructed similarly to the one that killed Joan Kipp 11 years earlier. This discovery prompted investigators to link the two incidents, recognizing that the 1982 death of Joan Kipp was not an isolated event, but the first in a series of attacks. On April 5, 1994, at approximately 1:20 p.m., Alice Caswell, a 75-year-old woman residing in a brick home in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, received a package through her mail slot. The package was addressed to Richard McGarrell, Alice's brother and a retired customs agent who had worked at Newark Airport. McGarrell had lived with Alice more than 20 years earlier, but now resided in a New Jersey retirement home. Alice routinely opened mail addressed to her brother, either discarding unwanted items or forwarding important correspondence. When Alice opened the package, an explosive device detonated, sending shrapnel into her abdomen. She managed to exit her home and seek assistance from neighbors, who contacted emergency services. The incident involving Alice Caswell complicated the investigation because she was not the intended recipient of the package. Investigators struggled to determine connections between the victims, as this represented the first case where the person opening the package was not the addressee. On May 18, 1994, investigators focused on Louis Cipolla, a former U.S. Customs officer and firearm instructor suspected in a related incident in Verplanck, New York. A small explosion at the home of Gary and Joanne Dykeman caused property damage without injuries. The victims were associated with a publishing company that had previous connections to Cipolla. The multi-agency task force investigating the mail bombing cases searched Cipolla's residence on May 20, 1994. They recovered bomb-making equipment, including machinery, black powder, and grenades. Most significantly, they found newspaper clippings from the previous month detailing the explosive device sent to Alice Caswell. Despite the suggestive evidence, Louis Cipolla was eventually cleared of involvement in the zip gun bomber case. He faced charges related to the Verplanck incident, but investigators found no evidence connecting him to the mail bombing series. On June 27, 1995, Stephanie Gaffney, an 18-year-old woman approximately 8 months pregnant, was staying at her grandparents' apartment in the St. Albans neighborhood of Queens. While speaking on the telephone, she noticed mail delivery and retrieved a package addressed to Gilmore. Stephanie opened the package, which contained a book that exploded upon opening. She sustained burns to her abdomen, chest, and legs from shrapnel but survived the attack. Due to fetal distress caused by the incident, doctors induced labor the following day, and Stephanie delivered a healthy baby girl. She believed her survival was due to holding the book at an angle that directed the blast away from her body. On June 20, 1996, Richard and Marietta Bazile, retired real estate agents in their late 70s, received a package at their 2-story stucco home in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. The package was addressed to Marietta but opened by Richard. When Richard opened the container, an explosive device detonated, creating property damage including a shattered kitchen window and wall damage. Ken Barris, the mail carrier who had delivered the package, entered the home to assist after hearing the explosion. He observed evidence of the device's construction, noting what appeared to be 2 barrels positioned on either side of the container and smelling smoke from the detonation. Remarkably, Richard Bazile avoided injury from the 3 bullets fired by the device. This incident marked the final confirmed attack in the series. The investigation involved multiple agencies, including the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the New York Police Department, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York. Investigators struggled to identify connections between victims or establish a clear motive. Kevin B. Barry, a retired NYPD bomb squad detective, noted the lack of apparent connections between targets, stating that investigators never came up with a rhyme or reason on who he was targeting. Some investigators theorized that the bombings represented extortion attempts. This theory was based on observations that several victims were reluctant to discuss the incidents with investigators. One anonymous law enforcement source noted that some victims seemed to learn their lesson and move on, as if wanting to close the chapter on the experience. However, no evidence of actual extortion attempts was discovered. Stephen Wavra became the primary suspect in the investigation. Wavra had served in the United States Navy from 1972 to 1973, during which time he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Following his military service, he accumulated an extensive criminal history, including possession of noxious liquids, making bomb threats against postal facilities, and assaulting a military police officer. Law enforcement had twice discovered Stephen Wavra creating devices similar to those used by the zip gun bomber. He had also been detained shortly after bombing incidents on 2 separate occasions, raising suspicions about his involvement. In 1983, 1 year after Joan Kipp's death, police conducting an unrelated search of Wavra's residence found bomb-making equipment on the kitchen table and a hollowed-out book similar to the device that killed Joan. Wavra claimed responsibility for the materials, stating that his roommate had no knowledge of his activities and that he intended to use the device in another crime, not through the mail, but on a U.S. military base. Investigators discovered that Joan Kipp had been Stephen Wavra's guidance counselor at Diker Heights Junior High School. Wavra had been held back twice during his education, and investigators theorized he might have harbored resentment toward Joan Kipp, holding her responsible for his academic difficulties. Stephen Wavra denied involvement in Joan Kipp's death, providing what investigators considered a credible alibi. "I had nothing against her. I was in prison at the time. They know that I could not possibly directly be involved in it." Official records confirmed that Wavra was incarcerated during May 1982 when Joan Kipp was killed. Despite the alibi for the initial incident, some investigators speculated that Wavra might have worked with an accomplice who mailed the package on his behalf. In 1995, Stephen Wavra was arrested at a Brooklyn public library branch while carrying a hollowed-out book containing X-Acto knives. 4 .22 caliber rifle shells were also found in his possession, which violated federal law due to his status as a convicted felon. This arrest prompted renewed focus from the zip gun bomber task force. Investigators discovered a connection between Wavra's roommate and the bombing victims through a shared pharmacist. John Tarangelo, a retired detective who worked on the case for over 2 years, stated that investigations consistently returned to Wavra and his roommate. Tarangelo noted that there was always some common denominator between the 2 men and the victims. However, he acknowledged that investigators could never establish a conclusive connection. Neither Stephen Wavra nor his roommate was ever charged with the zip gun bomber crimes. Wavra was subsequently sentenced to 90 months in federal prison for possession of ammunition as a convicted felon. He served his sentence in Beaumont, Texas, and was released in March 2005. Wavra continued to deny involvement in the bombing series and claimed to be working on his own case story of the investigation, though this account was never published. The case remains officially open with a reward of $100,000 offered for information leading to the identification and arrest of the perpetrator. The reward represents one of the largest offered for an unsolved mail bombing case in U.S. history, and the case continues to be classified as an active investigation by federal authorities.